Welcome back to our pre-debate interviews. I'm Rudyard Griffiths. Real pleasure to have with me for the next 10 minutes or so for a chat about tonight's debate, Laura Ingraham. She's a best-selling author. We all know her as the host of the big U.S. talk radio show, The Laura Ingraham Show. And you're here on the Munk Debate stage tonight. So terrific to have you on Toronto.
Wait a second. Is there a debate? Oh my gosh, I'm getting out of here. There's no way I'm debating. I didn't even know there was a debate. I thought this was, weren't we doing something sports related? Wasn't there a big game last night?
The Blue Jays.
Yes.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Go Jays.
Watch it. Yankees are still the best, even if they have a bad record.
Laura, one of the reasons we're really excited to have you here was that you talk with upwards of 5 million Americans a day on your show. So compared to, a lot of the folks in the senior faculty lounge at an Ivy League school, you're actually in conversation with average Americans.
Yeah.
What are you hearing that's different this election? You've been doing this for a while, compared to the other elections where you're, again, talking to Americans on Main Street.
I think people have a sense of loss of control. They feel like the country is slowly slipping away, the country that they love, that their ability to make a decent living is being marginalized, diminished. I think people are frustrated, whether you're from a Republican background or Democrat background or independent, that Washington just doesn't listen to the people, that Washington has a big ears for the big donors, but for regular working class people I came from, there's really no voice, there's no representation. And it's frustrating, I think, for many Americans to see Washington in such either gridlock or producing no solutions that seem to either bring our debt down or advance our economic futures. I think that's really frustrating to people. So frustration, ebbs and flows over political history. But right now, I think there's a general sense that America's losing her position in the world and losing their dreams. American people are losing their dreams that their children are going to live a better life than they do.
You've talked before powerfully about this idea of home and how this is very important to how Americans think about themselves, their own lives, and the country. Explain that to us.
Yeah, we're always breaking the electorate in the United States down by demographic groups. So you have the suburban women, you have the uneducated, white vote, then you have the college grads. And it seems to me that one of the themes, again, of this election cycle is the insecurity a lot of people feel about the homeland and even about their own homes. With, in some cases, in some cities, rising violent crime rates. People are seeing record numbers of unlawful immigrants crossing our border to the south. We're okay with you guys to the north. You guys are fine. But we have real problems at the southern border, clearly. And there's a concern about ISIS, and there's a concern about loss of economic opportunity, especially for those people who enter the workforce at the lower end of the spectrum, those first-time job seekers. I get a lot of calls from people in places like Texas and Florida, and they say, Laura, if I don't speak Spanish, I basically can't get certain jobs in the hospitality industry and the food service industry and so forth. So there's a sense that the government doesn't quite work for the people any longer. It works for, perhaps other constituencies, maybe global constituencies, in some cases, maybe people who aren't even American citizens. And that's very frustrating for people as well. So the rise of Trump comes from some of that alienation. And for the first time in a long time, I think a lot of people think that in Donald Trump, even with his kind of colorful language and so forth, in him they see a fighter for the everyman, which is unusual because he's a billionaire. Mm-hmm. But they feel like if he's a bully who's going to bully the bullies in Washington. And that gives people, I think, some hope. Mm-hmm.
So do you feel like Trump has, again, emerged out of this America that's more anxious, more uncertain maybe about its own future and fate in the world and at home? Does this go away with Trump, or is this part of American political culture now?
Yeah, I think a lot of people misread what's happening in the United States today. I think they believe this is just an election about a big personality versus an established name like the Clintons. And that's not really getting at the problem here. If Trump goes away tomorrow, and I said this a year ago when he was still in the GOP Republican primary, if Trump goes away tomorrow, these problems of globalization and stagnant wages and America in decline in foreign policy, those aren't going away. I mean, we have the rise of China and the decline of the United States. Now, everyone in Canada might think that's fine. That's a dynamic that's just fine in perpetuity. But I would say America goes down the tubes. Freedom around the world is imperiled. And so Trump goes away tomorrow. These problems are not going to be solved. And in my mind, nothing that Hillary Clinton has said really indicates that she has any ideas about how to solve this prosperity box that we find ourselves in, and how to reassert American influence around the world without extending ourselves in places where we can't afford to be. It's not 1984. We're $19 trillion in debt. So it's a lot of practical realities are weighing on the political dynamic. But I don't think it's not about Trump's personality. It's about these issues that have been gnawing at the American psyche for some time.
Someone who's predominantly known as a conservative commentator,
Yeah.
Curious what your thoughts are, Bernie Sanders and that kind of triangulation, Sanders, Trump, Clinton. Like, how do we unpack that?
Well, it's very interesting because Bernie Sanders is a socialist, an avowed socialist. But there's a place where the socialists and and more of the populist conservatives come together. It's an odd dynamic, but it kind of makes sense. They have different solutions, but they diagnose the problem in a similar way. Sanders is against a lot of these big global trade deals that are never amended. And I think Americans generally, and Trump himself thinks NAFTA with Canada has been great, and we've had a great relationship with Canada. But in other countries, it's been different. We've had a huge trade deficit problem in Asia and obviously with Mexico. Bernie Sanders agrees with Trump on that. They agree that the big global corporations have exerted way too much influence on American politics and have outsized influence on the economic landscape in the country. So they agree on the bigness problem. The bigger the corporation, the less accountable. The bigger the government, in many ways, the less accountable. Bernie might not agree with that last part as much, but on the trade issue and the globalization issue, there's a lot that kind of comes parallel with the two candidates. Where Bernie Sanders is different is he thinks big government is the solution to the globalization problem. But at some point, you run out of other people's money to spend. I mean, at some point, taxing people at 70%, which I don't know, Bernie wants 60 or 70%, but that's not going to do it. That's going to cause all sorts of other problems. So the solutions for them are different, but diagnosing the income disparity and the pressure, the downward pressure on the middle class, that's where they really are in sync. So it's really funny to hear Bernie out there campaigning with Hillary. I mean, Hillary is 100% for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, 100%. She always was, and now she's saying she isn't, but it's just laughable. Bernie Sanders is vehemently opposed to it. I mean, Bill Clinton was the one in 1999, 2000 who was standing with Alan Greenspan in the Rose Garden begging Congress to grant normal trade relation status to China and joining the WTO. Well, since then, we've seen China expand 12-fold in their economy, and ours has obviously declined. The United States has declined. That hasn't worked out the way they promised it would. So the Clintons are big into the global trade deals, and Bernie Sanders isn't, so it's interesting.
You volunteered a lot of your time visiting with American troops overseas, Afghanistan, Iraq.
Iraq, not Afghanistan, but I'd love to go to Afghanistan.
So
let's go together.
Okay, one of these
Club
days.
Med, Kabul.
But how do you, because big supporter of the military,
Yeah.
big supporter, I guess, of the idea of American power
Yeah.
and America's ability to shape the world according to values of freedom and democracy. Trump seems to, some people would say, seems to be projecting a different vibe, more of a let's back off. America doesn't need to engage as much with the world. If we do, it should be on a whole different set of terms. As a conservative, are you comfortable with that, or is that, is there a bit of daylight between you and Trump on those types of issues?
I think I work for Ronald Reagan, and when you go back and you read some of Ronald Reagan's seminal speeches when he was a candidate running for the presidency in 1980, Reagan was very clear that our goal here is peace. We want a peaceful world. America doesn't want to fight every conflict. We don't want to be, the policeman of the world. But we have to be strong enough to maintain the peace, both for ourselves and our allies. But people forget that, when Ronald Reagan had our troops in Lebanon and we lost 242 Marines at their Marine base in Lebanon, Reagan's response wasn't to double down and send in the bombers. His response was pull them out. Our big military conflict was Grenada. We didn't. It wasn't. Going around as the world's policeman and remaking the world in our image. We believe freedom should be emulated, but we also understand that our obligation, first and foremost, is to the American people. So their safety, their security, and the support of our allies abroad. When we can help, we should help. But the American understanding is that America is this ideal and this place, and if it's not preserved on the home front, then the idea that we're going to bring democracy to Syria is fanciful. So I think Reagan was actually. I think people misread Reagan today, or they remember Reagan as like Ronnie Reagan. He's like running around the world, guns ablazing.
Star Wars.
It really wasn't that. It was peace through strength. It was coming to the table with Gorbachev in Reykjavik and with a steely gaze say, no, we're not going to do that. This is not beneficial to the United States. We have to redo. What we're about to do, we're going to have to do it in a different way. And so the strength, you project your strength in a lot of different ways. Sometimes the strongest person is the person who doesn't throw a punch. And so.
Well, just finally, talking about strength, you're obviously a very confident woman. What would you say to women voters who have reacted very negatively to Trump?
Well, I think the headlines of the day are always, a lot of times they tend toward the more tabloid. And he said this 20 years ago. I think women are pretty, savvy, and they're pretty smart. And I think most voters out there have a real sense that we need to turn the page. Putting the personalities aside, what's happened to America over the last 15 years? I'm not putting it all on Obama either. I mean, we're going back a ways. I mean, the middle class has not had a raise since 1999. That's a long time to tell the middle class, sorry, we're kind of out of ideas for you. And I know gas prices are, it follows, but they're down in the United States, and people can buy a lot of plastic stuff from China and get a lot of toys that break in 3 weeks. But people just have a sense that it's slipping away. And I would say to women voters, don't focus on what the media outlets want you to focus on. Focus on your own life. Is this acceptable to you? Has this all worked out the way you thought it should?
Are you better 15 years later?
Yeah, I mean, if Hillary Clinton has this secret plan for jobs in the economy, has she been keeping it from Barack Obama for the last 8 years? I mean, is it in some treasure chest somewhere with locks around it, and just to pry it open the right way and you'll have all the answers? I mean, I don't think it's about personalities. I think it's a pragmatic understanding of what we've done, whether in Iraq or moving forward, and the huge debt we've piled onto our country in the last 8 years. It hasn't worked. Doing the same thing and continuing to hope there's a different result is, at some point, literally insane. And I don't think women are insane. I think we are the glue of society, and so I think we're protectors and we're practical. So we love Canadian nice, and we love the nice vibe in Canada. By the way, could this place be any cleaner? I mean, I'm used to being in New York. It's trash everywhere. This is the most incredible city. I love Toronto, so I love it. Could I move to Canada if Hillary's elected? No, but I could have dual citizenship. I'd love it. So consider me, even though I'm an anomaly, I'm sure, in this country.
Peter Usanov's called Toronto,
it's
New
so
York
great.
New York run by the Swiss.
Oh, I love it. I love Toronto. It's
we
so much
try.
fun.
Laura, thank you so much
Great
for
to be
coming.
here.
I really look forward to you on the stage tonight.
Good. Any jokes, just pass them my way.
Let's do it.
Good. Fantastic.
Stay tuned. Speaker Newt Gingrich is up next momentarily. Thanks for watching.